Right. Okay. That's enough of that. There's so much to go through today. I'm so pleased to have Robin here on the show, and I want to just go through a couple of initial news stories just to set the flavour off the back of last night with those amendments. Robin, can you hear me, sir?
I can. Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, that's awesome. Great. Okay, terrific. Well, hopefully you can see what I can see on your screen, people. But I'm just going to go through the flavour of the day according to Fake Stream. Over to you. Metro, The Guardian, May goes back to Brussels, but EU says nothing has changed. And apparently nothing has changed today in the meantime either. Daily Mail, Theresa's triumph on night of high drama. PM wins key Brexit vote. Unites her party, crushes Corbyn and tells EU, let's do a deal. So that gives us a flavour. Robin, what exactly happened last night in your estimation, sir, with those amendments?
With the amendments? I think what happened, I think there was some kind of deal done to defeat Yvette Cooper's amendment, and I imagine behind the scenes the whips arranged that would be defeated in exchange for allowing the other amendment that did go through to go through. That's what I think probably happened.
Okay, we're going to talk a bit more about it. There were 2 amendments that succeeded out of 7, as I understand it. One of them was one that the government supported themselves, the Brady amendment. The guy who's in charge of the 1922 committee, who recently was all over the news because of that confidence vote that he had to marshal. What is it that he's after, Mr. Brady, and that the government's supporting now?
Well, the idea being that Theresa May's got to go back to the EU and do a deal without the backstop, or to ameliorate the effects of the backstop. That's the idea.
Okay, we're going to be talking more about that backstop, but that clearly is the key word there. And there was one other amendment that succeeded that is more controversial, but that possibly might come to nothing anyway. Is it Dame Spellman?
Spellman, yeah.
Placing a spell on democracy. What is it? What was her amendment about?
You're going to have to remind me, Ollie. I've been out all day in Westminster.
That's all right. That's all right.
In front of
I completely understand. I was passing the buck anyway, sir. What it was about was she basically wanted to prevent any prospect of no deal at all. And that actually was voted in with a majority of not many votes. What was it?
How? It was 3-1-3. It was 318 to 310. Yeah, that's right.
But the main thing, though, as I understand it, is that amendment is not legally binding. So it's at the discretion of Theresa May, someone who voted Remain. I think we're beginning to get into the guts of this conversation already, aren't we? Okay, what could possibly go wrong here, sir, off the back of last night?
Well, okay. I think from what I've seen today, and I haven't seen much of the coverage today, but I think the EU are using that amendment to conclude, therefore, that the Commons doesn't want a no-deal scenario. I don't think you can really conclude that with any great degree of clarity, because the Commons really hasn't agreed on anything they particularly want at the moment. And the other amendment, which asked Theresa May to go back to Brussels and renegotiate on the backstop, so open the agreement and renegotiate on the backstop, so that we're not sort of permanently held in limbo with the European Union. I think there's members of the ERG have said that they won't support the withdrawal agreement with the backstop as it is currently. But that does not mean that they will conversely support it if it's gone, because there are many, many other aspects of the withdrawal agreement that they're not happy with, and quite rightly we shouldn't be happy with. There are probably 20 different things in reality, components of the withdrawal agreement which are fundamentally no good to us. And I think also, I know you're going to come on to this in a minute, but as Bill Cash revealed yesterday, the whole kind of process that's planned with the withdrawal agreement is fundamentally flawed. It's duplicitous, as you've said.
Okay. Well, without further ado, and I've got your video on the screen now. Without further ado, let's have a quick look and see what Bill Cash said in the Commons yesterday. This is him asking the PM a question, and then we're going to analyse this. Here we go.
As to the question of our control over our laws and to honour the referendum, will my right honourable friend give instructions to make certain that in any future withdrawal implementation bill there will be an express repeal of the 1972 Act so as to dovetail with Section 1 of the Withdrawal Act 2018 we've already passed?
The Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend...
Okay, before we carry on with her answer, Teresa, what does that mean in English, Robin, more or less, what Bill Cash was just asking?
He was, rather than being in a situation where he sort of said to Theresa May, can you confirm that there is another bill planned which will repeal the repeal of the 1972 Communities Act, he chose to pose it in a question in the way he did, which effectively sort of trapped the Prime Minister in having to answer his question, and in so doing admit that there is another bill which will become an Act of Parliament ultimately, that is coming down track. Let me just explain why this is the case, okay?
Thank you.
So a few weeks ago, in fact, probably just before Christmas, I noticed that Bill Cash in the Commons was bringing up this kind of strange anomaly. The withdrawal agreement, the deal, is a treaty. It's an international treaty. Now, international treaties do not have legal precedence over acts of Parliament. Okay?
Right.
So if we've got a withdrawal act, which was passed into law June, July, whenever it was last year, that says we're leaving on March the 29th. And then we've got a treaty which is in basic conflict with that, because it says a whole load of things in it that mean we would effectively still be in transition, so we would still be in the European Union effectively and to a very large extent. So he was sort of saying, well, how does that work? These are things that are in conflict. It's not possible. These two things cannot be true. That was his position before Christmas. I went to interview him about 2 or 3 weeks ago, filmed a short interview with him, which you'll see some clips on the Great Brexit Debate, not that one, but some older clips 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I'm going to play one in a second. Please carry on.
And at that point, he was uncovering for the first time the fact that, in fact, there was this Act of Parliament which is now called the Withdrawal Agreement Bill.
Yes.
So something bill before it's voted on, and when it's voted on and goes through both houses and the whole parliamentary process and then receives royal assent, then it becomes the Act. So it's the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, as opposed to the Withdrawal Act, which was the one that was passed last year. So this is deliberately confusing stuff, isn't it? We've got the Withdrawal Act, now we've got the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, which would become the Withdrawal Agreement Act. Right. So the Withdrawal Agreement repealed the 1972 Communities Act, which is the legal instrument which binds us into the European Union.
Yeah.
The Withdrawal Agreement Bill is designed to repeal the repeal. That's effectively what the Prime Minister was saying.
Okay, so okay. Let me play this clip from Bill explaining a little bit more about this. This is from your interview with him, and then we'll come back to you and go through this in a bit more detail, Robin. Thank you. But personally, I got to say, I found this a little bit hard to take in at first, and I don't know about you, but anyway, let's go through it carefully because clearly it's very important. So this is...
They're doing all this, but actually it's all sound and fury because it doesn't have any statutory effect. attempts to pass motions in the House of Commons, and the same applies to the Dominic Grieve amendments or the Yvette Cooper amendments and so on, are all outbursts of frustration because they somehow or other want to stay in the European Union. And that is where their frustration boils over into these extraordinary attempts to pass motions which have no legislative effect. The repeal of the 1972 Act is in black and white. It says what it says, which is that we leave the European Union on exit day, and that means that we are no longer subject to the EU laws, and that includes arrangements such as a new kind of single market or a new kind of customs union or a new kind of arrangement for trading purposes and so on. How often do we have to say to them, these frothing reversers, as I call them, the only way is by repealing the repeal of the 1972 Act, and that is kind of cuckoo land. It's not going to happen.
Right. Okay. That wasn't actually the clip that I meant to play, but never mind.
It wasn't. Well, can I just kind of say there? So that was the first clip from the interview that I did with Bill 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And at that point, it sounds very reassuring, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, he's talking about frothing remorons or something, but apart from that, yes, it sounds, yeah.
So, sorry, it sounds rather confusing. But first of all, that was the first clip that we got out of the interview, which at first sounds very reassuring. It's not going to happen. It's cloud cuckoo land. Mm-hmm. Then he gets into the only way that could be overcome is with another Act of Parliament. And then subsequently, and what he really revealed in the Commons yesterday, or what he exposed, was the fact that indeed there is another Act of Parliament coming down track. And if you play the second half of that clip, I don't know if you've still got it racked up there, Ollie, of the first clip that we looked at, you'll hear how the Prime Minister responded. She's even got an acronym for it. She calls it the WAB, the WAB, the Withdrawal Agreement Bill. You know, why do you use acronyms? Because you need those when you're communicating about something a lot. So it's clearly something that's being spoken about in number 10 very regularly.
I'm going to play his question again because it's only 20 seconds or so, and then we'll hear Theresa May's answer as well. But now we've got a bit of a primer of what this is about. And okay, here we go.
Most grateful. As to the question of our control over our laws and to honour the referendum, will my right honourable friend give instructions to make certain that in any future withdrawal implementation bill there will be an express repeal of the 1972 Act so as to dovetail with Section 1 of the Withdrawal Act 2018 we've already passed?
Minister.
Can I say to my honourable friend that, obviously, as he knows, in the EU Withdrawal Act, we repealed the 72 European Communities Act. For the purposes of the implementation period, it would be necessary to replicate the impact of some of those aspects of that act.
Okay. Replicate some aspects of that. Her first sentence there sounded correct. That yes, we do need to. It was necessary to repeal the ECA, but then she's talking about replicating certain parts of that act. What does she mean there?
She means repealing the repeal. Effectively, that's what it boils down to. That's what's being indicated by that. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Let's hear how she goes on.
Certainly take what my honourable friend has said, and within the WAB, within the withdrawal agreement bill that we will need to bring forward to this House, we will make absolutely clear the arrangements for ensuring that act, the European Communities Act, and the impact of it does not go further beyond the end of that implementation period.
Right. Okay. So I am confused here, Robin. I mean, the bottom line is that I was under the impression that we had set the date for repealing the ECA as Brexit Day, the day that we leave off the back of Article 50, the 29th of March. So that's changed?
No, that hasn't changed. What it's saying is that there is another Act of Parliament coming down track. Now, we don't know when that's going to be introduced. It's not been scheduled yet. But there is another Act of Parliament called the WAB, as the Prime Minister just described it there.
Yeah.
And that reverse, in considerable part by the sounds of it, the repeal of the 1972 European Communities Act. To what extent it'll do that will be down to, lots of argument in the Commons, no doubt, but that is basically the intention. And if the clip I think you meant to show a minute ago was another one with Bill, where he describes it as being, extreme, audacious. The plan to do this is quite extraordinary.
Okay, so this is going to be, at least it's going to go through the Commons, and so all the people in the Commons that don't give a damn about democracy can get a chance to look at it. What happens in the Commons is obviously it's going to be how damaging or not this is to Brexit. What are the possibilities that you see? What are your concerns, or are we maybe being a little bit more concerned about this than we need to be at this stage?
No, I think what it shows is that the Prime Minister's intention is very clearly that she wants to tie us into the European Union again. I mean, essentially, the withdrawal agreement, we're being given this alternative, these two alternatives, aren't we? There was the withdrawal agreement, which is supposedly Brexit, and there is no deal, which is not Brexit. Well, no deal is Brexit, and there is no deal because, in fact, there are lots of bilateral arrangements already being made and put in place. Absolutely. So there is no such thing as a no-deal scenario. Yeah. The withdrawal agreement effectively is non-voting Remain. That's really what the withdrawal agreement means. It means staying in a transition period up to 2099. 20XX, as it says in the withdrawal agreement. Also means, and that's even if the Northern Ireland backstop goes. If the Northern Ireland backstop stays in, then we can stay in forever. But I mean, forever, as far as anybody is really concerned, 2099 is good enough for a definition of forever, really, because it's kicking it so far as the long grass. There are so many problems with the withdrawal agreement. On fisheries, on farming, on all kinds of things, that it's really not. It would be insanity for us to sign up to that. But we're being very heavily misled, really, about what's actually going on here.
When do you? I suppose it's going to be another 2 weeks, isn't it? That May's got to negotiate with the EU now, and then presumably is supposed to take something back to Parliament for what? Another meaningful vote. If that were to transpire, and I don't know, if they kind of said, okay, let's look at this, let's go for this, then is it at that stage that this legislation would be introduced? The WAB, the Withdrawal Act, the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, would that be introduced at that stage? Is that when this would become an issue?
Yeah, I think the sequence of events would be, first there would be another vote on a revised withdrawal agreement. If that went through successfully, then the withdrawal agreement bill, the WAB, would be introduced straight after that, presumably before March 29th, and would be pushed through both houses very, very quickly by the end of March for that to all occur. Otherwise, really, we couldn't leave at the end of March. So the real question that this now poses is whether the government will try and play for time, trying to get another 3 months delay in Article 50, which could only be done with the agreement of the EU. But that may well be the next thing that they try. But I think that would be very, very damaging.
Now that of course is a separate issue to the cash, but nonetheless, yes, absolutely. I mean, that is surely what they're gunning for. It seems to me. I mean, my position on this is that I'm completely sceptical. She's a Remainer. The Tory party brought in a Remainer basically to deliver Remain, and all of that kind of conspiratorial stuff is frankly my take on this. Is my belief. It just seems to me the logic of the whole thing, the way that she's undergone the entire negotiation process, and her entire general election campaign, for that matter, a complete joke. It's almost as though she's completely trying to kick the country in the teeth But setting that aside, oh blimey, I tell you, I've lost my thread a bit. Right, okay. I want to just take a few comments and then come back to looking at some of the duplicity in a bit more detail. So a few comments. Christine Bucock, who actually is the reason that I got you on the show this evening, Robin. So thank you very much indeed, Christine, for sharing that video earlier in the early hours of this morning. This is what concerns me, Olly. It should not be allowed. Implementation period. We're still under EU jurisdiction. Can you ask Robin? Well, actually, yeah, that's what I was getting to now, and I will do in just a sec. Melvin Jones, not all Remainers will always fly the opposition. We're more than a star on someone else's flag. Now, Armin Ahmoud, anyone want to dance? Anthony McCann, so the 1972 Act will still be in place? Question mark. Okay, Robin, that's not actually the case, is it? It is being repealed, but they're talking about repealing the repeal. What does... I know we have covered this a bit, or you have, but I don't understand it entirely myself either. What does that mean?
What does what mean? What does what?
Sorry, okay. Anthony is asking, so the 1972 Act, the ECA, will still be in place? Question mark. What's your answer to that?
Well, it's been repealed by the Withdrawal Act, or it's been repealed by the Withdrawal Act, which passed into law June, July last year, but that doesn't come into force until March the 29th. So the only way that repeal can be reversed is by another Act of Parliament before the March 29th, or by shifting the March 29th date out a bit and repealing it before that. That's the only way that it could occur. So we haven't seen a draft of the WAB, of the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, so we don't know exactly how that will be done. But what Bill Cash was exposing was the fact that it would effectively be a repeal of a repeal. Think of it. We were thinking about this yesterday, myself and some colleagues. I work with the Bruges Group very often, and a colleague at the Bruges Group saying, "Well, what do we call this?" And I think we just call it the Boomerang Bill. Because, basically, that's what it is. It means that the European Communities Act comes back, either in its full disastrous glory for us, or in a slightly diluted form. But certainly, it's repealing the repeal. It's a boomerang bill.
Okay. We can't be sure as to the extent of the danger of these waters on the horizon there. Derby Dragon sort of thing. But... It's fantastic to see someone like Bill Cash ahead of the game and priming us so that we're ready to tackle this as soon as that's the case. That, I guess, is our position on this at the moment, is it not, Robin?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, it's basically what Bill's doing was forewarning, and I think in the Commons. I mean, I was at a Bruges Group event today with Priti Patel and Sir John Redwood. And I posed a question to them, and it was apparent that they noted what Bill Cash had said, but they hadn't actually thought through the full implications of that. So I think what Bill was doing was he was alerting members of Parliament, because it's very easy to sit there for hours in the Commons, I think, and not think about the implications of every tiny thing that's said by every member of Parliament. And what Bill was doing, because he was going about it in a slightly kind of oblique way, the way that he posed the question to the Prime Minister, and I don't know if you saw in the clip his deadpan look. He was sort of intimidated by a completely deadpan look, which she stumbled immediately.
You mean the SAG, the Home Secretary's look to Theresa May?
Well, that's too, because that's if a picture's worth 1,000 words, that look was worth 10,000, really, wasn't it?
That's right. I've just pulled it on the screen. I hope you can see this, folks. You might need to just make your screen a wee bit bigger, but you can see the look that Sajid is the Saj or whatever he is, that bloke out of Doctor Who. Is giving Theresa May, and I mean, it is quite telling. It is quite telling. How? Okay, all right. We're going to come back to the kind of the shenanigans of these characters and their duplicity, in my opinion, in a minute. But let's go around and about around the houses a little bit. because we really come back to what happened last night with the going back to the EU to discuss the backstop. I guess that is where we are now. With the withdrawal agreement, as it stands, setting aside any confusion with other bills and what have you, what are your biggest concerns, Robin, that you see in that document? The veto, I guess, to give the EU a veto over your future, over your sovereign future, is a pretty big issue. And that's what we hear concerns about a great deal. What else?
I think one of the biggest ones is the intention, not just within a transition period, but a permanent intention to stay in a customs union with the European Union. Mm-hmm. I think it's page 330 of the document, which outlines the fact that we would I think it says something like the future arrangements will be based on a common customs territory. I think it says something like that. So somebody out there's got a PDF on their computer and they can look up page 330. They could maybe put it into the comments, the exact phrase, but that's roughly the gist of it. So what it's saying is it's making a commitment within the withdrawal agreement that we would be part of a customs union. Now, that is entirely against the manifesto commitment of all the Conservative MPs.
Yeah.
It is clearly not Brexit. All of the major players in 2016 accepted that leaving the European Union meant being outside the customs union. Mm. And the real implication of being within a customs union means that we hand over all our ability to be able to negotiate trade around the world to the European Union. And it means that anything that we import from the European Union, we have to charge European Union tariffs on. Mm-hmm. 80% of that tariff money that we collect goes straight to the European Union in Brussels. We keep 20% to cover our administration costs. So if you buy, you buy a camera and it comes in to the UK on a shipping container and arrives in the UK, a tariff is charged by the UK government, but we don't even get to retain that money. That goes to Brussels currently. Now, this is nuts. The economic benefits of Brexit are not entirely, but very largely derived from being out of the customs union.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, that seemed to be quite a big part of the pitch, no? We are not, just to reiterate, if we're in the customs union, then we're not going to get any trade deals with anybody else, are we? It basically has to go through the EU, is that not the case?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the case. And the real problem with trying to do trade deals through the EU, and the reason why we haven't got trade deals with got a trade deal with the US, we haven't got a trade deal with India, we haven't got a trade deal with China. The three big parts of the economic.
Robin, I'm sorry. Just go back to where you were mentioning India and other countries, because I had to reboot the sound card. I do apologise. I have had some technical problems with this rig. Carry on, please.
Okay, so I'll go back to talking about customs union. Yeah, it means we can't do independent trade deals with the US, for example, with India, with China, all obviously nations that we have far greater ties with historically than the European Union does. But the reason they can't do trade deals and the European Union fails so badly to do reasonable trade deals around the world, to do free trade with around the world, is because it has the 27 or 28 with us, but 27 nations, each with conflicting interests. So, for example, we may want to deal with a South American country that produces oranges, but of course the Spanish don't want the oranges because it competes with their market. They produce oranges in Seville, and you take that for every different economic activity around 27 countries, and it means there's almost always somebody who feels that having a free trade deal on a particular category of product is going to detrimentally affect them, and that's not helping us. We are a country who is 80% of our economy is services. Unless we want to go backwards and pay people, Chinese or Indian wages to work in factories, pay pence an hour or, small amounts of money an hour, we are going to be a knowledge-based economy, and therefore it's going to be largely services.
Yes. And also, it should be said, we should be looking to build up our industry again, should we not? For example, our steel industry, which is quite dangerous potentially as a nation if your steel industry has basically been ground into the dust, and you're relying on other nations for your steel, and other industries as well, very, very important, which have seem to have just been shot during our 4.5 decades with the this EU EEC club, whatever it is. We should be looking to build those back up, no? And that's another reason, is it not, for coming out of the EU? Just as a brief aside there, but also I wanted to ask you, the WTOs that the media seems to be so scared of, or whatever. The United States trades with the EU on WTOs, no? Is that not China? Do they not trade with the EU with WTOs? Does not most of the world's countries trade on WTOs? So I want to ask you, please, about our industry and the potential that we have there, and also the potential with WTOs.
Yeah. Okay. So, the first thing you picked up there was strategic industries like steel, coal. Yeah, I mean, there are strategic industries that, as a nation, you may want to maintain for your own security. Steel might be one of those. I'm no expert in that, but certainly that might be one of those. Concerned. We'll talk about some audio things again. Everything all right?
Yeah, sorry, Robin. Yeah, the audio did. I tell you, I rebuilt this machine today to try and sort this audio out specifically for this show. In fact, I got 2 hours kip last night as a result of that, and the bloody thing hasn't worked. I can't. It never gone. Oh, yeah, it's better now, Robin. It's better now. Okay, yes. So that's we could be a little bit more secure now, but also presumably, I don't know. Am I wrong? Is it correct, this kind of theory that the EU has basically helped us, or we have allowed them to crush our industry largely, and yes, we have a fantastic service economy. We still seem to be about the most successful economy in Europe anyway, but we could be doing so much better if we had industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the EU, whether it's deliberate or not. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't work in our favour. The sort of industries that we do well with are high-tech manufacturing, for example. That's stuff that we do. And when I say high-tech manufacturing, I either mean producing high technology or using high technology in a manufacturing process, so an automated manufacturing process. So there are two sort of dimensions to that. Those are the things that we do well. Pharmaceuticals, we do well. IT, we do well. Creative industries, we lead the world by a long way. I used to have an IT business that worked with media companies, advertising agencies, and creative industries, print, publishing, and advertising sort of business, and we lead the world in that area. So yeah, there are lots of opportunities that we're missing by being wrapped into the EU. But the real do you want me to go into the advantage and disadvantage that has? Because
yes.
I'm going to shut up, and I'll shut up, Olly, but I'll carry on otherwise.
Well, yeah, no, I do want to get a bit more of an idea for anybody watching that isn't quite sure of because we only get really one argument from the media, which is that we are going to suffer so badly. Our economy is going to suffer so badly. What would you say is the converse argument? No,
not at all. I mean, you find yourself arguing against fiction, which is a kind of ridiculous thing to have to do. And the reason for that is the BBC and the mainstream media, as I think we all know, are just pumping out propaganda at the moment. We had the on Monday night before the amendment votes in Parliament on Tuesday, the 10 o'clock news on the BBC was leading with this story about shelves being empty in supermarkets in the instance of a no-deal Brexit. Well, why on earth would that occur? We've heard from the people who head up Calais and Dover who've said there will be no new checks at the ports. Nothing will change. Therefore, there is no reason whatsoever for there to be any delays. I can assure everybody that, French farmers still want to sell us their produce. They're quite dependent on our market at the moment. The difficulty for them in a no-deal scenario will be that we don't want to buy from them. Because, frankly, there are a lot of products where we're just waiting for the containers to arrive. Let's just take one example of that. There is a tariff of up to 32% on a bottle of wine. Now, I don't know about you. When I go to my local supermarket and I see French bottles of wine sitting on the next to a bottle of wine from Australia, New Zealand, or South Africa.
Yep.
Let's take the Australian bottle of wine. So the Australians are able to produce that wine to the same sort of standard, ship it from the other side of the planet, and they can still sell it to us at the same price as the French bottle, but we're paying a 32% tariff on the Australian one. So they're effectively selling it to us 32% plus. Actually, it's more than that, but a minimum of 32% cheaper. That's what they're retaining. Than the French bottle of wine. So that tells you about the efficiency of Australian wine producers versus French wine producers. And that is always if you talk to any economist, that is always the argument against having this, what they call protectionist system within Europe, is if you try and protect industries by erecting tariff barriers, then all you do is you disincentivize your own industries from becoming more efficient because you protect them.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to take a few comments and then we'll move on a little bit. Kevin Gibson, when we joined the EEC, places like China and half of Europe, including Russia, were closed off from the West. Now, 40 years later, the markets have opened up. It's time we open our eyes and arms and embrace the opportunity to trade with the rest of the world. Fred Blogg, here's a stat for you, Ollie. In 1974, our manufacturing GDP was 83%, but in 2016 it was down to just 12%. EU has killed our manufacturing base off. And Robin, I'm going to read out a few more comments. If you'd like to pipe up and mention anything about any of these comments, please do. Scott,
Can I just interject on the first comment, talking about EEC and China and Russia? I think that's absolutely fair point. Back in the 1970s, tariffs were very, very, very high. There was therefore an argument was presented that we should join the EEC to avoid world tariffs, because if we could trade freely, well, the ultimate aim was that we would join the EEC and tariffs would be dismantled, which they eventually were, and therefore we would avoid this problem of trying to sell physical products around the world against these high tariff barriers. But of course, as your commenter there said, that's not the case.
Kevin Gibson.
Global free trade, global low tariff trade. I mean, if we take our exports to the EU at the moment, back in 2016, I asked a business analyst to do some investigation for me, a guy called Benedict, who may be watching this now. And Ben went away and did an enormous amount of work and looked at all of our tariffs and said, okay, well, let's assume that we were outside the EU and we had to pay tariffs on all the things that we export. What would it cost us? And the figure that he came up with, which I'll now update to roughly 2018 figures, is about 5 to 6 billion pounds a year. Now, if you think that our net bill, after the rebate and after all the money that the EU spends in the UK, our net bill to be members of the EU is 10 to 12 billion. Yep. It means that we're paying 10 to 12 billion a year to save 5 to 6 billion a year. I'm no mathematical genius, but it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, no, completely. Absolutely. Okay, another couple of comments. Amanda Thompson, I don't like it when it said we allowed. If we are kept out of the loop of info, how do we allow? Carl Melench, Article 24, lets you leave on WTO and have 2 years to sort trade deal with the EU. Is he correct, Robin?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I mean, basically the situation we're in at the moment, the EU are saying, oh, we're not opening up the withdrawal agreement. It's been negotiated. That's the way it is. Well, of course, they're going to say that initially. As we get further and further towards March, that is likely to change. I met a group of political campaigners, one very seasoned Labour campaigner, who said to me, "Oh, this is typical Blair." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And this campaigner said to me, "The Northern Ireland backstop is highly likely just to be a red herring. It'll be put up as something that is this great challenge to be overcome." And it's designed, therefore, to focus everybody's attention on the Northern Ireland backstop, at which point then the Northern Ireland backstop suddenly falls away. There's a solution to that, and everybody goes, oh, fantastic, we can sign up to the withdrawal agreement. And, of course, we've solved none of the other problems with the withdrawal agreement, because all we've done is focused on the Northern Ireland backstop. And this individual who I can't name, they were very close to the whole, to the sort of campaigning within the Blair years. And of course, as we know, Blair and Adonis,
yeah,
have been having repeated meetings with the European Union. So that hypothesis is entirely possible. The Northern Ireland backstop is just a red herring, because as we know, nobody wants to erect a hard border. A hard border was there because of the troubles in Northern Ireland. It doesn't mean that a hard border is needed now. It was only needed because of the troubles.
Yes, sure. You're saying that the backstop, the Northern Irish border issue, is just a lot of nonsense, a political mechanism to keep us leashed to the EU. Is that your gripe here?
Well, no. What I'm saying, yes, it is at one level. What I'm saying is that the allegation that has been run past me is that this is a standard kind of political strategy, is you put up a sort of red herring problem that actually can be overcome, but you make that be the focal point, you make that the problem to be overcome. And then what happens is, at the last minute, that problem is overcome, and then everybody goes, oh, great, we can go ahead with this now. When in fact what we need to be doing is focusing more on the things like Bill Cash brought up, the fundamental problems with the withdrawal agreement, rather than focusing too much on the Northern Ireland backstop, because that is just one of a myriad of problems. And you take that away and you've still got fundamental massive problems with withdrawal agreements.
It struck me at the beginning of Theresa May's tenure in this process, which I could never understand in itself. The first thing that she did, pretty much, was roll over on her back and say, "Yeah, no, fine, EU. We won't do parallel talks. We'll shelve the trade talks and just sort out the withdrawal agreement." Was that not a fundamental error, or even duplicitous in nature, for a start?
Well, it was certainly a fundamental error, because it's put us in a position now where we now have a transition period, and we have a transition to what? Well, there is no trade deal. There is no trade deal within the withdrawal agreement. It just says, "Oh, we'll deal with that later." So what are we transitioning to? Nothing. So why do we need a transition period at all? Why do we need a withdrawal agreement? We don't.
And also, had she insisted on trade talks at the same time as the withdrawal agreement, the actual divorce, then, and we could have just walked away, actually, legally, I think. But had she not insisted on that, would it not have been the case that the backstop would have been sorted out as part of the trade talks?
Well, maybe. I mean, I think the criticism a lot of people have made is that she accepted the sequencing that the European Union set up, which was, agreeing the divorce bill first, and then getting into some trade talks, which concluded in nothing really, and ultimately resulted in us getting to Chequers with nothing agreed, and the resignations having to occur at that point, because she'd undermined her own Secretary of State and ministers, and they felt they had to resign.
Okay, we'll take a couple more comments. Chris Ford, EU.
Lots of ground here, Ollie.
Sorry, go on, Robin.
I'm just saying we're covering a lot of ground. I hope this isn't too confusing for people.
Well, I'm very, very grateful, and I think that people are. And looking at the comments, people certainly seem to be. Chris Ford, EU agenda is equalisation. No competition makes all the people equally poor and the corporate elite richer. Amin Ahmed won't have to worry about stacking lettuces. Your cabbage. I think that's a reply to Charlotte, actually. I think they're having a... and Charlotte says, don't read out any of my messages, Ollie, so I don't know what she's saying. Sarah Boland, they're all corrupt to the core in Parliament. It's a huge fix. Right. How do they get away with this? I mean, it's quite clear. The will of the British people was to leave. 62.8% of constituencies in general election terms, 408 of 650 constituencies voted to leave. And yet we have the Subarus of this world, for example, whose constituents in her case voted 70% to leave, and she was re-elected at the last general election with a much reduced majority, almost a trace majority that she received. And yet she, as we know, and various others, protesting and da, 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 da. How do they get away with this? Would people be correct in thinking that there is an establishment conspiracy going on with people like Ken Clarke, steering committee member for the Bilderberg Group for decades? This really is it not, Robin, deep state stuff?
Right. Okay. Well, we're talking about conspiracy theories. Let me just level this one a bit first before we start talking about conspiracy theories. All right. Yeah. So, look, the first thing to say about conspiracy theories or conspiracy is that all politics is conspiracy. It is people conspiring, working together to achieve a common goal, a common aim. That's what politics is really essentially about, isn't it? Yes. So, in order to discredit things, people talk about conspiracy theories, but actually all politics is conspiracy. It's people working together to achieve something. So some things, what is the theory is the issue, and all of the Bilderberg stuff, the sort of deep dark state stuff is theory. We don't actually have proof about how that works and all that kind of thing. But certainly we can see that there is influence that people have outside of democratic politics, and we can see that has a big influence in terms of funding and also in terms of the sort of policy direction that governments across the world take.
Yes. What we do know is that people do meet up and have a chat behind closed doors, and then for people like, for example, Prime Minister, as was then David Cameron, met Kissinger at the Watford gathering of Bilderberg. And then number 10, when asked by some diligent reporter or other to produce the minutes, refused. And they have these kind of meetings where, okay, fair enough, they're allowed to have a private chat or what have you. But then we also know that there are people like Ken Clarke who are heavily invested in this kind of group. That then stand up at the dispatch box occasionally and defend that or whatever. But then we know that the EU comes up with, for example, these bits of legislation or agreements or what have you that they want to put in place, such as TTIP, for example, which is never properly discussed. The Trans-Atlantic Pact, I think that one was. Which are never properly discussed and debated amongst the electorate, and then these things become, and that didn't because Trump's binned it, but these things tend to become policy. Another example, a better example, the UN Migration Pact. Now, the UN Migration Pact or Compact, as I understand it, a whole bunch of folks sat together around a table in Marrakesh or something and agreed this thing and signed it off, including Theresa May, our Prime Minister, and we didn't hear anything about it. And apparently what it basically means is that no more borders, people can basically run around wherever they like, and we can basically have abject chaos and not know who is coming into the country. And when you consider that the first duty of government is to protect its people, you'd think that that's a little bit, maybe, I don't know, is it? Should we not even have had a debate, particularly after the referendum, when migration clearly was an issue? My point, Robin, is that these things seem to get signed through increasingly without any debate at all. I mean, the UN Migration Compact, I'm not wrong with my concern there, am I?
No. Let's go back. Yeah, no. Sure. I mean, let's, rather than focusing on that specific, let's just go back to the first question, which is, what are these people up to? There is a basic sickness in the system. There's a basic problem in the system that members of Parliament, the European Union, other organisations around the world are not seeking to make decisions through democratic means. And even those people who are democratically elected, so for example, a large rump of our members of Parliament, believe that their job is to make the true.
Hold on, Robin. Your audio just cut out there. Your audio just cut out. I've just rebooted the sound card again. I'm sorry. You mentioned members of Parliament. Please pick back up from there.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So we're saying about members of Parliament, we have a bit of a problem with the rump of our members of Parliament that they feel that they're in a better position to discuss than the British public are. Have you lost sound again?
I did for a minute. You said MPs, they consider themselves to be in a better position. This is Ken Clarke's argument, isn't it? To decide than are their electorate. Is that what you say?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, what we do is we elect people every few years to go to Parliament and to represent our interests. So we have to leave them to do that.
Did it again.
But there needs to be a fairly constant dialogue with the public, so that we can have scrutiny of that, and we scrutinise them via the media. Now, the difficulty we've got at the moment is we can't trust the media because the mainstream media are not dependable. The mainstream media have become politicised, so we don't know what information to trust, and that's why so many of us get our information in the way that people who are listening and watching this tonight are doing. They're hearing it from people who are not part of the media, so it's disintermediated. We're listening directly, although you can argue that for myself. Maybe not for yourself, Olly. You're actually a journalist. You're a proper journalist. I'm just a guy who's involved in politics and therefore communicates directly to whoever wants to listen to what I think is going on.
Well, sir, you've produced some fantastic journalism with this Bill Cash and what have you. It seems to me that anybody who really wants to just look for the truth genuinely is on the way to journalism. And the people who call themselves journalists, it seems to me that they're just a bunch of jobsworths. And actually, I do question. A question for you, please, sir. What is the bigger risk to our society? I don't know if we're coming to a bit of an end game now, potentially. Maybe this was a question more than 10 years ago, but what would you say is the bigger risk to our society? Would it be the media, or would it be these apparently anti-democratic parliamentarians?
We have a systemic problem. I don't think you can separate the two entirely. I think to sort of argue about which is the worst of a bad bunch. Is not really the way to look at it. I mean, the fact is we have a systemic problem. We have a parliamentary democratic system which was conceived a few hundred years ago, but slowly people have been taking the cogs out of the machine, and the machine has stopped working properly. So the relationship between the public, the media, and the politicians doesn't work properly.
None of you have called in to ask Robin any questions. It's very, very poor, but loads of comments coming in. Stavros says, Westminster is a stinkhole full of corruption and deceit. It's in its DNA, its culture. Why do people vote? Blimey. I have to say, at the last election, I voted Conservative. I want to get your opinion on this, basically just to question my sanity, please, Robin, because I was under the impression that whilst I was tempted at that stage, by the way, to vote for UKIP, that both Conservative and the Labour Party would be delivering on the will of the British people as stated in their manifestos, it just seemed to me that it was more likely to actually come to fruition under a Conservative Party, despite Ted Heath, than with a party that was still mired in Blairites who just seemed like such a bunch of EU fanboys. But apparently, I don't know. I think probably all in all, that was the right choice to vote Conservative last time, all in all with what I'm seeing. Surely, though, with what we have seen, Robin, it would be madness ever again for anybody who believes in democracy to vote for Labour, the Liberal Democrats, or the Conservative Party.
I think this is the difficulty, isn't it? And it is precisely that problem which in a way kind of creates the problem that we've got. And what I mean by that is that when you have your only vote can really go to the none of the above party, then effectively you lose your democratic voice. And that allows the political parties to do whatever they want to do. So if we go back to the whole European Union problem, the problem that we had was that the major political parties of the UK signed up to the whole European project back in the 1970s, before the first referendum. So we didn't have a choice. We didn't have a political choice, really, because all of the parties were supporting the whole European project.
Yes.
This is the difficulty that we have.
I'm just going to reboot the audio card one more. What a pain to have gremlins. Okay,
Can't hear you.
Okay, we're back. We're back. Sorry about that. Robin.
Can I just interject one small point, Olly? Saw a couple of people asking in the comment stream a second ago. Who's Robin? Who's this guy? Can I just explain?
Yes, please do.
So I run a Facebook site called The Great Brexit Debate, which I started up in 2016. I decided back in March 2016 that I'd been invited to sort of maybe go and work with Vote Leave, but I decided not to do that. And I set up my own sort of media-based campaign called The Great Brexit Debate. It's been running since then. It was done for most of the period after the
Robin, the audio buggered up again there. Sorry. The Great Brexit Debate, and you were asked to join the Vote Leave team, and then the audio started playing up.
Yeah, so back in 2015, when it became apparent to various people that there was going to be a referendum, and at that point I was sort of asked if I'd like to be part of that, but ultimately I decided not to. I set up my own campaign, my own social media campaign. So if people want to go onto Facebook and just type The Great Brexit Debate into the search bar at the top left of Facebook, hit the button, you'll find my site there, and you can look at all the videos and everything. And I work on a regular basis with the Bruges group. I help them out with their filming, communications and all that kind of stuff. So I go and interview and speak to members of Parliament and film and produce clips from the events that they hold. So we just had an event today in Parliament in Westminster with Sir John Redwood and Priti Patel, which was one of the regular events. So you'll see clips on my site from that event probably tomorrow and later in the week.
Superb. Excellent. What was it that your background is in media, but not journalism, Robin? So what was it that pushed you, that had you involved in this and setting up the Great Brexit Debate? What was it that provoked you?
Well, I've been involved in, I'm fascinated by politics for as long as I can remember. But about, how long ago was it now? In a 2004-5 time, I started to get directly involved in politics. I helped a friend out with a campaign. Obviously, I'd been in marketing, run an IT business in the media industry. So marketing was my kind of thing, and applying standard marketing to political campaigning, it's not rocket science. It's very much the same sort of thing. So I started in that, and then I, at the time, lived in Surrey Heath, and Surrey Heath is Michael Gove's constituency. So I met Michael before, in fact, he was elected, and got involved with the Conservative association there. Not, to be honest, not particularly because I was interested in local politics, because I'm not particularly. I think a lot of people from all parties do a very valuable job, but frankly, it's not something that interests me particularly. I was more interested in national politics. And it was quite an interesting thing, really, getting to know Michael before he went through that meteoric period of his career when he came to Parliament in 2005. And was the Secretary of State by 2010, which is pretty fast going.
We're going to have to close off, Robin, in just a minute or so. But I did want to get a closing thought from you, please. Where do you think we're going with this process?
Well, I think it's very much in the balance at the moment. I think it is possible that we could leave on the March the 29th and be out of the EU and be free and be independent. And I think that's my fervent hope. What we've got to do is just keep on between now and then putting in the tackles. When we are exposing people like you and I and lots of the people out there, we need to keep on putting in the tackles. And what I mean by that is exposing the issues when they arise, as the Bill Cash clip did. And to all of the people who are commenting on your site and may have drifted over and are watching this from my site currently, a big thank you to everyone. Every time you hit that share button, you are letting a wider and wider audience know about this stuff. And really, it's the only option we've got at the moment. We're fighting predominantly against a mainstream media who is against us, who is part of the establishment, who want us to stay in the European Union. And the job that we do on social media is absolutely vital. It's the only way that people get the counter-argument, that get actually the truth.
God bless you, Robin Horsley. Thank you, sir. I do apologise for this sound card. I just had to reboot the damn thing again. Absolute nightmare. I must have rebooted it a dozen times. And Thomas White in the comments, you need a sound card. A new sound card, Ollie. Yeah, you're right. I do.
Yeah.
Aye. So you used to work in IT, Robin? Blimey, I tell you what. Do you come and sort out my rig? Oh, listen. Robin Horsley, the great Brexit debate, my special guest today. Robin, I do hope you become a regular guest, sir, because, man, you know a lot more about this stuff than me, frankly. And it's fantastic to have somebody who actually understands what they're talking about on the show.
Happy to do it, Olly. Yeah, thank you.
Good man, Robin. Thank you. I will keep it very close. I cannot believe that I only found Robin's site yesterday. This morning, the early hours of this morning. That's pathetic. I'm really pleased. And big cheers to you, Chris Ford, because you told me months ago to go and check out this site. I am going to go and buy a new sound card tomorrow. If anybody can donate to my cause here, I'd appreciate that. PayPal.me/Brexit. And all funds go back into this thing, I promise you. Absolutely. There's no profit here. Actually, in fact, I've had about 40 quid in the last 2 months. Yeah. But the bottom line, Robin, is that we've got to get our sovereignty. I mean, we talked a lot about money today and tonight and what have you, and they always are on the media. But for me, it's about sovereignty. It's about self-determination.
It always was. Yeah, absolutely. And from sovereignty, from self-determination, from democracy, prosperity is built. That's the fundamentals. Look back at history. That's what creates prosperity.
God bless you. God bless you. Robin Horsley, thank you. Thank you very much. Good to build bridges with you, sir. And also, one other question, actually. Priti Patel and John Redwood, you mentioned that you saw them today. Did they seem pleased with what happened last night?
Well, no. John Redwood voted against the government last night.
Yeah. Is he pretty pessimistic, all in all?
No, well, actually, we didn't sort of touch on that particularly. He was exceptionally staunch, as frankly he always is. He was very straightforward about the whole thing. He said, we need to leave the EU. Will be absolutely fine. I think we just need to. I'd like to just not use the term WTO. It's WTO FTA, because WTO, World Trade Organization terms, FTA, Free Trade Agreement, because there'll be lots of them around the world. Look what New Zealand's saying, look what Australia's saying, Canada, all of the Commonwealth countries around the world want to have free trade arrangements with us. It's very clear. It's very obvious. The benefits are very obvious for them. Let's wrap it up. Let's just call it clean Brexit, as people are starting to call it now. It is basically a clean Brexit.
Absolutely. Or just leaving. Thank you, Robin. I want to say a big cheers to everybody that got involved tonight, even though you didn't call in, but loads of comments. Thank you so much. And I will try and sort out this sound card. And this has been Daily Brexit. I'm Olly Connelly. I'll see you tomorrow. And Katie Fanning, UKIP NEC member, is on the show tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And I know 1 hour is just not long enough for this show. I know that, but that's just the way it is. So God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Alrighty, here's to us and bugger plutocracy.